And now, without any further delay, let's begin today's FICO webinar, once again, optimizing decisions in healthcare supply chains. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Steve Banker. Steve is the Vice President of Supply Chain Services at ARC Advisory Group and has been researching and writing about issues related to supply chain talent, processes, and technology for 25 years. Take it away, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Unmute. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rami Musa, Director of Supply Chain Modeling and Advanced Analytics at Johnson & Johnson. And also joining us is Zahir Balaporia, who is a Senior Director of Solutions Consulting at FICO. So let's begin with some softball questions here. And this is for you, Rami. Rami, can you just tell us a little bit about who Johnson & Johnson is and what the Johnson & Johnson supply chain looks like?
Sure, Steve. Yeah, thank you. If we go to the next slide, I have a couple of slides. Maybe I can just tell you more about it. So Johnson & Johnson, we are the largest healthcare company in the world with more than 130,000 employees, $80+ billion annual revenue. Our products touch almost 12 to 13% of the population on a daily basis of the whole planet Earth, 1 billion patients a day. Our products are presented to the market in three fashions, three segments: consumer health, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices. So the consumer health is what you see actually at the supermarket on the shelf, such as Tylenol, Listerine, Johnson baby stuff. And in the bottom here, you will see the breakdown of the annual revenue. So interestingly, it starts with the pharma being about half of our revenue coming from it, then medical devices, then basically consumer health. It's very interesting that people don't know that about except the 14% of our or the $13.9 billion annual revenue that we have, which is on consumer health. We're way much more than that actually. Okay. Now this is, by the way, from the investor fact sheet for 2019. You're basically welcome to go visit and learn more about it. If we go to the next slide, talking about supply chain. Almost half of our employees work in supply chain. It's very interesting. And such a strong supply chain in the past 5 years, we have enhanced significantly. And we became #1 healthcare company according to Gartner in supply chain. And we are #3 across all companies. Our vision is to set the standard for in healthcare and become leader in supply chain in the whole world. Our promise is to be pioneer to deliver better solutions in for the health of the human being on this planet. And our key focus area is to focus on fast track innovation, agility, and end-to-end value without localizing our solutions. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rami. And I'm going to give Zahir the same softball question. Can you tell us a little bit about FICO and the role that they play in supply chain management, Zahir?
Sure, Steve, thanks a lot. So FICO is a billion-dollar software company, most well-known in the US for its pioneering work in predicting credit risk, preventing fraud, etc. But I think it's safe to say that our work in supply chain is probably generally less visible, even though we have marquee customers like Johnson & Johnson, who we work with or use FICO software. And many other clients like Amazon, who spoke at FICO World a few years ago on Amazon Air, and companies like Procter & Gamble and BASF that have won FICO Decision Awards. So, a wide range of marquee clients related to their work in supply chain. So I'm always thankful for forums like this where we can talk about what we do, how we do it. Our analytics and optimization play across all aspects of supply chain: plan, source, make, deliver. And we enable our clients with capabilities that address problems in supply chain analytics more holistically. So we enable teams like Rami's team, who's fantastic to work with, and not just to build models, but to deliver them to business users in secure, scalable, cloud-ready platforms, and all the necessary buzzwords that are needed in order to get stuff out there and operational today, so that their models can deliver benefit and business value for their business users. And maybe Rami can talk to that, when it's appropriate. But that's about us.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Zahir. And Rami, tell us a little bit about advanced analytics in Johnson & Johnson, how that
Sure.
works.
Sure. So it's a newish organization. We have started this endeavor more than 5 years ago, but about that, and we are becoming quite significant and impacting significantly our company. If we go to the next slide, if you may, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So we are part of the corporate supply chain. We don't belong to particular business. We serve all businesses. So we are leveraged team. So our focus is to move Johnson & Johnson into the digital future through cutting edge technology, through customer service improvement, quality, cost, and competitive advantage. Now, our guiding principles is what you see here in blue. We aim at providing and developing scalable and reusable solutions. Essentially, we don't want to have one-offs, right? We want to have our solutions to be multiplied, to be scaled very quickly. So this is something we always aim for it to happen. We aim for end-to-end closed-loop implementation from both supply chain and from the development piece. We need to visit as many nodes as needs be, and also we need to take the data from where we could ingest it and back to where it would be deployed. We are utilizing best-in-class modern stack, so we are basing all our solution on our digital stack, which is based on our common data layer, what you see here in the foundation of this chart here. So we operate on 3 layers, the CDL minus to CDL to CDL plus, where our data science solutions are living essentially, and agile and accelerated value delivery. So we don't want to wait, on a big bang solution just to deliver it, because otherwise, it will be wasted effort without enough reviews. And also we need to get values in piecemeals. So the 6 principles, the 6 pillars that you see in here are where we categorize our offering for data science. So simulation and optimization is what my team is focused on. So we work in network modeling, scheduling, planning, capacity modeling, inventory, MEIO, etc., digital twin and simulation, forecasting and predictive analytics. As you could see in here, Internet of Things, machine learning, natural language processing, and image engine, value chain analytics, and end-to-end visibility and visualization. Okay.
So Rami, partly what your team does, for example, if you're using network modeling, you're using a tool you already have, and you're doing an analysis. But partly what you're doing is you're building custom applications for the business. And I guess my comment would be, as I look across the industry, I see more and more companies going with public cloud solutions. Mm-hmm. And you can configure a public cloud solution, but you cannot customize it. Mm-hmm. You guys are going a little bit in the opposite direction. So can you talk a little bit about why you would be willing to build a custom application instead of buying something off the shelf?
That's a great question, Steve. And the way that it's back to our guiding principles is we want to get to our own scalable and reusable products, and we want to have our own, right? So we want to keep our IP, because our team is made of experts that we invested in them, and we want to utilize their talent to the fullest, as well as it's an advantage for us not to go and pay licenses, like very expensive ones, etc., and develop our own solutions that can scale as such. So, for example, we are using not open source only, but we also use some commercial and some halfway between, where we can build our own solutions. So we can go from Python, Pyomo, solutions on that level, up to high level applications to solve our optimization problems for supply chain. But we choose to have a platform typically like FICO, right, where it's been helping us in the sense that it's not only providing me a way to solve the problem, right? The modeling language, it gives me the solver, and it gives me the opportunity to publish the solution in the cloud. And that will hit what I need in an agile manner. So soon, we can model the problem, solve it in Express and publish it in Insight and put it out in the cloud. You don't need to install or download, and it will scale as fast as it can be.
So let's turn to you, Zahir. You have customers and they're using the FICO platform and they're building custom applications. Are there other reasons besides what Rami was talking about that companies do this?
I think Rami summarized it pretty well. Maybe all I'd add to it is, from my perspective, analytics is a lot about giving your data a voice, right? I mean, there's sort of this richness within your data that you're trying to extract some insight from. So when you can do that and give it the right voice, you can make better decisions. But anybody who's been doing this for a while understands that there's so many nuances to data, even within companies that share similar processes. And there are nuances to the problem being solved, especially if you're a large company at a global footprint, right? So I think if you try to standardize analytics too early, you either end up with a behemoth solution that is super expensive to buy and implement, and Rami kind of alluded to that, or you have a good, well-defined solution box, but, and if your problem fits it, sure, then use it. But in most cases, you end up having to jam your problem into somebody else's problem definition. So most of the cases that we see are clients that are kind of running into one of those two issues. And that's why the idea of building out a custom analytics solution makes good sense. So this is not an argument against standardization at all, because a lot of these applications leverage standards that are out there within the organization, right, around master data or the ERP solutions and things like that. So it's not an argument against standardization. It's just when you get into advanced analytics, I think it has to be a little more catered to the problem you're trying to solve. So the trick is to find the best of both worlds, standardize the things that are truly repeatable, but then customize your models to solve the right problem in the right place at the right time. And that's why I think you can generate significant value or ROI from building custom applications that leverage standardized data sources and processes, but again, solve the right problem in the right place at the right time.
So here, I have come across companies that do that a little bit. And just to put a little bit of color on what you're saying, what I have seen is people sort of looking at their end-to-end supply chain processes and saying, to a certain extent, Oracle or SAP or some supply chain application, has what are considered best practices, best processes in place. Mm-hmm. And we could use that. But let's look across our end-to-end supply chain and pick that 10% of areas, 20% of areas where what is out of the box isn't good enough. We want to be better than that. And to me, that's a perfect explanation for why a company would do it. But is this only a big company thing? I mean, you need to be a $5 billion company or $10 billion company to have data scientists like Rami that can do this?
So we have both types of clients, right? So it's always great fun to work with teams like Rami's and many of our other clients that have similar teams. It's sort of a different type of conversation that we're having with those organizations. So with Rami's team, for example, we introduced some new capability where they could take their Python models and deploy them with Express Insight. And these guys were off and running. It was fantastic, right? But there are probably more companies in the sort of the analytic maturity case where they need a little more help or a little more assistance. So in those cases, we work with either our solution partners to help them out or with our own services to help them out. But we take a slightly different path with them because in their case, now I sort of try to make sure they think about, maintainability, how they're going to manage these models, things like that, because models, once you build them, they don't just sit there and run forever, right? You got to keep an eye on them, make sure they're doing the right thing. So we may take a different approach with customers depending on where they are in their maturity curve, as we're building out a solution for somebody that doesn't have a team like Rami's to therefore maintain and do it. So I wouldn't say it's you can't do it if you're not a Johnson & Johnson type company, but you definitely shouldn't use the same approach that Johnson & Johnson uses. We use a different approach to make sure it works.
And Rami, I'd like to make this conversation a little bit more concrete. Can you talk about the areas in supply chain management where you guys are building custom applications?
Sure. So as you all will know, like supply chain is all about source, make, deliver, plan, and return. In some instances, we add quality to it. So we operate across all functions, okay? Mostly it's all cross-functional, as well as it is multi-nodes in its nature, right? So I can start with a problem about deliver. Maybe if you can go to, let me see what page that is. I think page 5, if you may. I can tell you about an application that we have started just not so long ago. If you go to page 5, if you may, Hugh. Okay, so it is next one. Just go to next one, if you may. Yeah. So this came to us about like almost like 4 months ago as of a problem. Essentially, some of our partners, business, actually consumer health in Asia Pacific, they have a major spend on their ocean containers. The fact of the matter that they did not have a science-based method to be able to know how to load, sequence, and stack the pallets inside the ocean container. So it's the beauty of it. It's a classical 3D loading problem. It's even a benchmark problem, right? But with the requirements that we have seen, we developed a solution in a quick way that would be basically on how to optimally increase and maximize the utilization of your containers. So as you could see here, the objective function is to minimize the freight cost. And they are having significant amount of spend in there. And our target has been to reduce it by 10%. Guess what? We are able to increase our utilization not by 10%, but between 12 to 15% essentially. So we're even exceeding that. Leave alone that the ocean container in Asia Pacific is becoming extremely scarce these days. And the price is increasing almost 6 times on them. So any small portion of saving is very significant. So this is on the top of the list as far as one of the most strategic solutions that we are doing for them. So we call the solution Load Max, as you could see here. We try to appeal basically to our customers and create our brand as such for it to scale quickly, and it has been. At this point, as I mentioned, the way that we are going about this is using a mixed integer program. We use FICO. We publish the solution, and it's currently being deployed and used by 2 major lanes in Asia Pacific. Interestingly, besides the objective function, what we look into as far as constraints are schedule of production, so sequence matters clearly, the container capacity, basically volume-wise and weight-wise. We look into balancing the load because, these containers, they're hoisted, right? You need to make sure that they don't tip over, right? So from A to B and C to D and the other way, A to C. So this is not quite an easy problem to solve, right? And we also look into, in our application, we make it generic enough. So essentially, if there is one country like Japan, for example, they don't want us to mix 2 products from consumer health, like Listerine and Tylenol, let's say, right? So we can do that. If you don't want to stack up to 3, maybe you stack up to 2. We can do that, no problem. It's all, with the preference that you start with the modeling. As I mentioned, we're seeing a huge amount of benefit in this. We are moving also now to the truck loading, right? So we started with ocean container. Now we're going to move it to truck loading, which is a tremendous opportunity down in Latin America and North America. This is compared to a solution we're paying, close of to $1 million actually a year just to solve it, and we're providing it in a small portion of the cost. As Zahir mentioned, this is a major thing for us. Is we cannot customize get the solution that's very well customized to a level that it's very hard to be flexible enough to add more to it, right? So we will need to wait on the mercy of the company to make changes for us just to adjust to our needs. We don't need to do that anymore, right? So we built it exactly to what we wanted. We make it generic enough, right? And we customize it in different modules. So this has been our method essentially.
It sounds like, on the ocean container side, a company your size, that's probably tens of millions of dollars of savings a year.
Correct. That's correct.
Any other examples, Rami?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about a plan example. I mean, we have plenty of examples. Like, just let me mention a few, right? So we work on hedging, which is a very interesting area, right? To hedge on our commodity, when to buy, when wait. Quite a challenging problem from predictive and prescriptive notion, right? We're getting good luck with it so far in some commodities. We're expanding. We are also looking into multi-echelon inventory modeling optimization. We look into network optimization. That's a major area for us, right? So open and close, flow optimization, where to make the product, etc. Scheduling is a major one. We got a lot of success actually with it. Our colleague, she's in her maternity leave. Shout out to her and to Yuching actually, who led it. She's actually my manager on this. Another one is what I'm going to present, and this one is actually from my team member Stephen Rayadi, and his group has been working on this. Now I'll give you another example, as I mentioned, which is on planning called CapRite. So if we go to the next slide, if you may, Hugh. Yeah. So this particular product is called CapRite. So capital right sizing. It's a long-range capacity and capital investment optimization that we have had. A team member of my group, Braulio Bruno, joined the group like a year and a half ago, and he's done an excellent job actually on this. So in essence, what it is, one of our major businesses is sold out in a significant way, okay? We will sell each and every product that we make. So now the challenge is, what shall we do about that? It's not only that I want to allocate volume to time buckets to machines and all, right? So I want to know what machines to buy and what machines to retrofit, which means that machines themselves, we will monkey with them essentially, right? To make them able to produce some new products, right? But with that, you're paying plenty of money, millions essentially, and in some instances, tens of millions. And whether you're going to retrofit or you will buy a new machine, it takes between few months to 2 years for it to come. So how do you deal with this, right? So you're going to retrofit machine and you're going to give up production. Is this a good idea? Well, in end-to-end thinking, yes, it is. And here's a proof, right? So here with this particular product, CapRite, prior to what we have started, there has been actually on a yearly basis a cross-functional team from plan, manufacturing, engineering, and finance. They meet for many weeks actually, like 10 or 20 people, just to come up with a decision. How many machines I should buy? What machine should I buy? What machine should I retrofit? When I should do that, and all this. And the decision ends up always being suboptimal. Okay, so now we come up with this application. We published it in the web, and it's being used. You don't need to install, you don't need to do anything. And the whole idea is, how can you minimize your investment by taking into account lots of factors, right? Such as you're getting the 5 to 10 years demand forecast. You're getting production data as far as availability and production rate, ramp ups, you're getting the potential qualifications, like what machine that you can use to solve this problem, as far as buying or retrofitting, and the investment costs and lead times for them to go. So put this all together, we get like more than 1 million of decision variables and lots constraints. It solves in a matter of minutes. And moving from weeks and 10 to 20 people just trying to figure out a solution, workable but suboptimal, we can get it in a matter of 10 minutes, essentially. Not only that, I think for me, the better value of this is essentially digitizing what's in people's mind, right? Because you're having so many groups and they all have tribal knowledge, as we call it, and it leaves with them if they retire, which is happening, right? Or it's never thought of as comprehensively and on to end as it should be. So this has been a tremendous benefit for the company, and we are enabling it to be part of the process of the business, essentially. Okay.
Yeah, Rami, as I listen to this, right, we have the container problem you solved, right? Tactical problem. With company J&J side, tens of millions of dollars a year. But once you get into these long-term strategic kind of decisions, I would imagine the payback is many times higher than the tactical time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were clearly talking about like significant amount, millions, right? And we've been lucky with our group. It's paid for itself for probably 20 years to come, right? The way that it is, or even beyond. So we're doing well that way, and we're excited about it. Luckily, the team loves what they're doing, and it works very well because we're saving the company lots of money. We not only that, right? One thing that not to ignore, if you look into the ocean container problem, right? We're also saving the planet, right? We're reducing the number of containers shipped, right, significantly, and this is a good thing, right? We also are becoming a little bit more responsive to our customers, to the patients, right? Our agility, our lead times are reducing significantly, and hence, we're getting a better service to our customers in a much faster manner. When we do network modeling, when we do scheduling, etc., we don't miss our orders. When we look into the problem comprehensively enough. So all these have been tremendous factors for us just to show our value. Many products that we're having. I haven't spoken about all of them clearly, right? This is one, two of, tens of them essentially.
And Zahir, we've heard Rami talk about a range of places where they're getting benefits, or they will get significant benefits from your platform. Anything come to mind that we haven't discussed yet here?
I think one of the key things that is required in order to get that benefit is, again, going back to what I said earlier, is when you put this into the hands of business users, right? So if, Rami has a brilliant team, and if they were able to build a lot of great models, but those models sat on the lab bench and they weren't able to actually get them out, you wouldn't see the benefit. So one of our key metrics is how fast can you get to an answer, once it's the time to first scenario run, right? So we're big on scenarios because it not only has benefits from a change management and adoption perspective, but it really also allows you to get to sort of the core needs of what you're building. So speed is not just a question of having models that run fast, but it's about how fast can you get that model into a user's hands. And I think that is one of the key things that if people are not focused on that, they should clearly look at that metric within their own, analytics or data science shops, because that is the fundamental, I think, sort of last mile problem in advanced analytics, in making sure that you're getting value from it. So as one of my good buddies, Jim Williams, used to say, models on the lab bench don't put points on the board, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to get it out of the lab, and you got to get it into people's hands. And as long as they're able to run scenarios, because then they can sort of, then it does also, when you can run scenarios, if I'm the business user and Rami's creating a model for me, it's not Rami's model anymore, right? Once I'm able to run scenarios, whatever solution I pick, whether it's container loading or long-range capital investment, because I was able to maybe tweak some parameters and rerun some scenarios, Now it's really my decision on what I pick. Rami enabled it, but I was, still I take much more ownership versus simply saying, oh, it's Rami's model, it's Rami's model.
So we've got several things I think that are interesting to push on here. One of the things you mentioned, Zahir, is just getting something done fast and showing it to people and making them excited helps with change management. So Rami, maybe you could talk about, you're not successful until people actually use these applications day to day, regular part of doing business. So can you talk about change management at Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So this is my daily basically struggle, is to work on deploying and convincing. It's not as easy as as it sounds to be clearly. I mean, you can show value, but you do need to convince people about what to expect. There are so many competing factors on this, right? And the change management on how we can incentivize and basically encourage people to become part of this is a major one, right? So that's why when we start our projects, we don't just jump on into solving the problem and sending it out and you're on your own, just go figure it out. I did my job, right? So this is clearly something that takes my group and the larger digital and data science group into a different mode of operations, which is to make an impact by really deploying and implementing the solution. What I have found to be true is that you can convince all the executives that you want, right? And you could be really smart and good at that and get the funding and all this. If people in middle management and on the floor are not convinced, they will find ways just to push back on that. It's always easy to say no and to critique something instead of just embracing it. So that's why the style here is, while we are working early on in engaging the stakeholders that matter, right? We also brand for our solution somewhat aggressively, right? To a point that people hear about it and they know about it, and also they co-develop it for us. We never say that we develop our own solutions, right? So it's always a co-development, right? So you bring someone from engineering, you bring someone from planning, right? And it's a fair statement. It's not that we are kissing up to them. Clearly, it's a true statement that we co-develop with them. And when this happens, right, you're moving a foe to become your friend, and they will be the ones who will fight for you, right? So this has been my experience with it. It's been fun. It takes different ways of thinking and different experience, and we are learning and we are getting better at it. You typically don't get that from fresh grads, right? You need someone who's more seasoned just to go through this change management process.
Right. And Zahir, you didn't use the term, but one of the trends is a trend toward agile implementations. So I'll just back up. A lot of people have heard of agile software development, where instead of spending months developing a piece of software and handing it over to users and say, is this good enough? You develop in short bursts and you show the users what you've developed, and then you can navigate better based on the feedback you're getting. I'm starting to hear more and more about agile implementations around supply chain software. Is that what you were talking about speed to solution?
Absolutely. So agile software development is fundamentally based on iterative development, right? There's different models for it, but fundamentally it's about iterating, having sprints, and requirements and solutions evolve through the collaboration, and especially when you have cross-functional teams. Like as Rami mentioned, you've got to bring these other voices into the process. For analytics applications, we believe this is absolutely critical because oftentimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And when you're building out some form of analytics, if you're building more transactional software, I think a process can be laid out and you're sort of headed towards a process. But with analytics, sometimes you find surprising things as you're actually exploring the problem a little more. So it's absolutely critical. That's why time to first scenario run is a critical metric for us. When someone finally sees what they will be working with, only then do the real requirements start to come up, right? It creates a better picture for a user, which creates better requirements for a solution developer. And when you do that in short sprints, I think you sort of create the right pressure in a project because it reduces sort of the work in process pipeline. It reduces unused code. It forces some tough choices to be made in a sprint, right? Where the most critical needs make it into the solution and the rest goes into the backlog, as it should be. And then sometimes, things on the backlog never make it into production, which is good because they were probably never going to be used before. I mean, I think we've all had experiences, if we've been doing this long enough, where, in a classic sort of waterfall approach to a project, you built out 100 things and you find that at the end of the day, the users are only using 20 of them, right? What a waste. All that time and effort spent testing, coding, doing that for the other 80%. What if you could have got to that core 20% much faster, which is really what's driving value, what users need. And if I could, I'll tie it back to the change management piece as well. I'm a huge fan of that piece of the problem. I like to call it the politics of analytics. And I've written about it, so folks can Google that and add it to the reading pile if they want to. But one of the things we've seen from the change space is that metrics are critically important. Oftentimes, the metrics for a process implemented before a model-based solution was in place can often be very local, right? Because you didn't really have a holistic way of looking at the problem. It was too complex for the human to really look at it holistically. So the natural process is to divide and conquer. Therefore, even though three of us may be part of a process, I'll have my metrics, you'll have yours, Steve, and Rami will have his, right? And in general, they should support each other, where we then focus on that because that's all we can manage. Now we put in an optimization where it's making trade-offs across all three of our processes, which by definition means one of our local metrics will probably get worse. And this is where the change management problem starts to kick in. And we've had this happen in multiple times. I remember a project where a production line supervisor was responsible for a couple of work cells. The optimization said, take some of your resources and move them downstream to this critical job, which was critical to the overall throughput. First, he said, no, I would never do that. When we explained to him why, he said, oh, no, that makes perfect sense, but I still can't do that. So why not? So because my boss said, first, I have to finish everything in my area before I release resources to another area, which not a value statement. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? In the old world, that's what you should do because you don't want to make the problem worse by letting more work, go past your station. But when you have something like a more advanced analytics solution that looks across that, you can't be using your old metrics anymore. So there's so many other factors that come into play from a change management perspective. And going back to agile, I think some of that stuff bubbles up to the surface a lot faster than you find it later on. You can even tweak your solution early on to say, I have to align with this metric for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's political. Then you can work it in early on, so you eventually end up with the value of a solution that's implemented.
Well, Zahir, I think what you're saying, about cross-functional optimization, anyone that studied supply chain management, that's going to resonate with them. Rami, I want to turn to you. Certainly, Johnson & Johnson has been in the news because of COVID. I certainly am looking forward for you guys to come out with that vaccine as soon as possible. Hopefully, I don't have to wait months to get vaccinated. But I guess my COVID question for you has COVID changed the priorities of what you're working on in your group? Has it brought new things to the surface that you wouldn't have even thought about working
on? Yeah. No, absolutely. It is an eye opener, and such pandemic happens on average every 100 years, but it's significant nonetheless. We've been working from home for almost 10 months, 11 months at this point. We've learned quite a bit, right? So the fact of the matter that your supply chain is no more as resilient as you would want it to be. So how can you make it as such, right? So at this point, with all the uncertainty that we see, right, we have considered different ways of modeling, such as utilizing the digital twin. So a colleague of ours, actually, Vishal, Varma, he's been leading such studies. So studying the impact of availability or lack of, or the variability of it, and how it impacts our supply chain. How can we know where we're falling short on making our supply chain robust enough, right? So this has been something that has been educational for us, and different teams are working on how we deal with the vaccination and how we can produce it well enough, and how can we, like another colleague of ours, he's working on the Jun Chen, he's working on the manufacturing improvement, actually. How can we make it as best as it can be, right? We are working on the vaccine allocation, right? So you're speaking about it. Hopefully, it will not be months, right? So, I mean, there are good news out there that says that hopefully soon we're going to be out and about. So yes, it's making us thinking differently. The fact of working remotely is a huge game changer for us. I mean, we're learning that really co-presence matters, but there is more to it. So now my team is all over the place, right? So I have people in Miami, some in Jersey, some in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and larger group is quite a bit actually above me, actually, in the West Coast. We have a lot in Europe as well. So, and we've been working very effectively and efficiently. Now, the challenge is on change management some, right? So you coming back to this, right? So being far from not meeting with person X or Y who are influential, typically going there and having coffee with them or taking them to lunch, that's usually helps, right? Now, I don't have that anymore. So we do need to go a little bit outside into becoming more innovative on how do we socialize and make sure that these things happen. So you definitely lots of changes, and it amazes me that we would have never had jobs 20 years ago if this pandemic hit us, right? We have internet now, right? And the fact that we are utilizing it and we are as adaptable as it can be, it amazes me, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. Rami, I'm going to push on this a little bit. I'm just going to use my vocabulary. I'm hearing a lot about the need for resilience, and I'm hearing about the need for agility. And I'm going to define it, what I think those things mean.
Sure.
For me, resilience means survival. Demand plummets, cash becomes king, we got to cut costs. That's kind of how I think about the resilience problem. The agility problem is demand surges in one place, it plummets in another, but we still need to serve customers. And we got to be able to be nimble to do that.
Yep.
So you're talking about both things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is in our metrics, actually, like high level metrics. So our chief supply chain officer is to look into these as far as resilience on its own, and lead times and cycle times on their own. They're all metrics. They can be competing, but we're juggling, to make things happen. Yeah.
Zahir, I've heard the phrase, you should never let a good crisis go to waste. And certainly COVID is a crisis. I've been hearing of some high-level supply chain people talking about supply chain projects that have been on the back bench, for years, that they wanted to do, they could never get approval to do them. Now they can. And the other thing they're telling me is COVID, it sometimes makes these projects go a lot faster than they would have gone a year or two ago, just because it's a crisis environment. Are you seeing any of that in your customer base?
I think a little bit. Things in terms of like curbside pickup, online ordering, home delivery, right? I think there's been a ton of acceleration there. Companies that might have had that on their roadmap, now there was a matter of survival. Crises kind of put a certain level of focus on, where you need to work, what you need to do, and resources also sometimes can get moved because you can't do anything in one area, so you might as well focus in another. So in that sense, there's some of that. Generally, I think across supply chain, the idea of a digital twin, that's not a new idea. I mean, anybody that's building supply chain models, for the last 25 years, that's the same idea, right? You're modeling your supply chain in terms of a digital twin. There's some stronger momentum there, so I see a lot of positive intent. But I think also when you're in a crisis, you're sort of in that survival mode, right? So you have to focus on recovery before you can get to resiliency, right? So there was a lot of talk about resiliency 6-8 months ago. I thought that was way too premature. Yeah, it's a great idea, but that's like talking about buying flood insurance while your basement is flooded, right? That's not the time. When your basement's flooding, you're bailing water, pumping stuff out. So I think it'll be interesting to see, even in the area of resiliency, where people actually end up now, because now it's the time to say, okay, we survived. For those that were lucky enough to survive the crisis as an organization, will they change sort of how they're looking forward and where they're making investments? Are they still going to go for low cost, or are they going to look at, I got to balance low cost with a little more resiliency in my overall supply chain design? One of the things that I love as stories coming out of the crisis, I'm generally an optimist, is that there were some really interesting pivots within some organizations that we work with, addressing issues that were brought on by the crisis. So in one case, a financial services customer, which as you can imagine, we have plenty of, probably did most of their work around credit risk optimization. Their team actually pivoted to building supply chain models for PPE, within their work. So here was an example of a customer that completely changed their focus area, right, and pivoted to supply chain to do what they needed to do. One of our airlines that we work with, they pivoted to build seat assignment models, which were designed around social distancing, right? Not something typically that they were doing, but that's where kind of the need took them. So I love those examples because, again, when you're in crisis, there's very little time to build new models. You're in survival mode. So when our clients can pivot fast to help in a crisis, I think it's a great testament, not only to their skills and their organization, but I'd like to think that it's a good sign that they turn to our technology to do it.
Wow, great stuff. So I want to change tack a little bit. I just want to open it up. I think we've had a good discussion. We've had an interesting discussion. I want to sort of move on to final thoughts because we do want some question and answer. But did our conversation sort of spark any ideas about something you'd like to go into a little bit more depth on? Either Zahir or Rami, any thoughts there would be great.
Go ahead, Zahir. I'll let you lead.
Okay. So actually, Steve, there was a question that came in around, as you analyze volatility and variability in your supply chain, how does that affect your evaluation of outsourcing to 3PL organizations? Maybe we can take that question separately, but I could sort of riff off of that a little bit on this question of volatility and variability in supply chains, because I think that is probably going to be, I believe, a topic that is again, not a new topic, but I think it's got new legs that will stick around a little bit longer versus sort of this passing phase when you have a crisis. Because I think that the political situation around the world, the environmental situation around the world, and things like COVID, which I hope are once in 100-year types of events, I think will generally create in the supply chain world much more variability than we're normally used to, right? I mean, anybody working in supply chain, variability is not new to them, right? Everything from a truck breaking down to orders getting canceled. I mean, that was just day-to-day life in supply chain. But I think the scale at which these events are happening, and also frequency, if you think of weather-related events, I think there's going to be a lot more focus on, how do we design supply chains that are more, that have maybe a little more in terms of shock absorbers within them. And it's not just by having more inventory, right? There's got to be a different solution as well. You can't just solve every problem by holding more inventory. And trade-offs to make along the way. So I think that's where a lot of the thinking is, at least on our side. And given that FICO obviously does a lot of work in the area of risk, we're trying to bring some of our thinking in the risk space, in the supply chain space, and build out better ways to think about that. So that's what's top of mind for me that maybe we haven't covered. Rami?
Yeah, so it's been, as I mentioned, quite educational. And for us, while COVID has been impacting our businesses, particularly the medical device businesses, right? Our consumer and pharma were typically, and you can see that they were okay, and actually pharma was growing expectedly somewhat. But what it presents to you is an opportunity. If things slow down on certain businesses on you, okay, let's right size this. It's a perfect opportunity for it, right? Because now you can consume them and you could relax a bit and just start to get to the level that you should go to. And since we were basically juggling many balls, it's a very difficult problem to go to the level. Let's say to get to the level of safety stock that you should go in your network, right? It's a perfect opportunity to do that in the medical device business. And we have seen the demand just bubbling up almost just about the start of COVID, right? And it was all astute and natural, I believe, right? Because that's a perfect opportunity to do so. Otherwise, when would you do it? You know, I have seen it once, and for one particular business, we were sold out big time, and I told them, listen, guys, you do need to increase your batch size by twice as much, right? And the answer to that has been, but okay, if we do that, then our service is going to get a bad hit at certain time. Yes, long term, we're going to get into where we should be producing. We're going to liberate capacity and whatnot. That's very well needed because each and every product we will sell, but we cannot do that now. And also another thing is like such big batches. You know, we are not moving except in air. So at this point, it will take time to move things in ocean. It's more cheaper, but it takes longer time. So all these kind of trade-offs, you get some time now just to reflect and make them happen, because otherwise there's no perfect time other than now just to do it. You know, along with we are considering more opportunities now for different methods of quantitative modeling, right? Our team is becoming more experienced, and we are learning how to collaborate with other institutions such as universities. We do have collaboration with Michigan and with Carnegie at this point, and we are considering some solutions that typically we wouldn't have considered. So we're growing, and this is something that I would love to grow more towards, to co-develop and research with you know, institutions like that on a long term. So these are just a couple of points on the top of my mind. Just want to make a mention of.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Steve, there's a question here for Rami. What is your typical time for your projects from start to implementation?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. It varies clearly, right? Some it varies on the availability and the urgency. Like some products that we can deliver in weeks, essentially, to get a value of. And the way that we do it through agile method is the way to go. And one thing that helped us is always to publish the solution on the web-based application, right? Then it will accelerate the deployment. Now, some products take us actually more than a year to develop, but I have seen 4 weeks to 1 year essentially, as far as some of the products that we have developed and deployed. Another question: as you analyze volatility and variability in your supply chain, how does that affect your evaluation of outsourcing to 3PL organizations? Well, I mean, interestingly, I worked in 3PL for years, right? And I'm now sitting on the other side of the table. It does make sense to use more 3PL in such instances, right? Because of the idea of consolidating your need with other customers of 3PL, for example, right? And that helps the cost, and we let them do what they're best at, and we do what we are best at. Interestingly, I was reading an article prior to this call, It's actually by our our friend here, Steve Banker, about how the world is moving towards or even automating these 3PL warehouses because of COVID, right? Somewhat because of also the increase of the omni-channel need, the e-commerce essentially, and because of the need of social distancing, right? So now we get to automate them, and when this happens, probably they will be a little bit more attractive to deal with as far as 3PL. Except that automating sometimes it gives you up some of the flexibility that's well needed to do more consolidation.
There's a question. There's a question that came in the chat area. Do you imagine blockchain technology merging with supply chain optimization solutions? For example, keeping track of assets all the way from production to retail. This could help synchronize different sectors of a company to function optimally. So interestingly, we had just touched on blockchain before we started this call.
So yeah, interestingly, Steve, probably you're the best to answer this question. I'll add to it.
Yeah. So yeah, my perspective is blockchain is not ready for prime time yet. As an industry analyst, I get technology companies constantly asking to brief me. And I probably had 40 blockchain companies of different forms come in and say they'd like to brief me on blockchain. And my question to them is always the same. Okay, if I take a briefing, can then I talk to one of your customers who is using blockchain every day as a regular part of doing business? And no one has been able to provide that yet. So, blockchain's coming at some point in time. It's probably coming to Rami's industry. Healthcare first because of track and trace. But I'm not seeing this, as something that's necessarily going to be right around the corner.
Yeah, if I may complement this to what Steve said, we do have actually experts in the field in our digital and data science organization who are specialized in blockchain, and we are definitely actively working on that particular venue towards better trace and track technology. Yeah, that in the life science industry, it seems like a natural choice. Yeah.
We have another question. I'm not sure if we can answer it quickly because I know we only have 2 minutes left. What are the real life scenarios where stochastic optimization is used, like in the container problem? Would you want to use it for demand stochasticity? If not, and why? Rami, you want to touch on that, or you want me to take it?
Yeah. So we did not model the problem stochastically in the LoadMax example, the ocean container, but it's definitely one area that we can, once we move from the deterministic view, we can look into the stochastic view. Now, we have not modeled stochastic optimization as such for a particular problem, but we always complement it with simulation, right? So that will add to the stochasticity perspective to the model, right? Eventually, we would love to do more of that. And this is area that I'm really interested to grow towards, especially on the strategic planning scenarios where randomness is key in there, like, forecast randomness, etc., availability, all of that. Yeah.
And the only thing I would add to that is, to some extent, we also complement this idea of uncertainty with scenario analysis, but you can do large scale scenario analysis. So don't think of just running 1, 2, or 3 scenarios. We have people that run thousands of scenarios to kind of get a better sense. Part of the issue with stochastic optimization, sometimes it's hard to understand what the model did and why, which then also results in a change management problem. So you got to be careful where you apply in terms of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, we have been at it 1 hour, and that's what we promised our users, that we keep it to 1 hour. So everyone that tuned in, I would like to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. And Zahir and Rami, fabulous job. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. It was
Thank
fun.
you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank you
Rob.
all. Thank you both. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And once again, we do thank you for joining today's webinar, and you may now disconnect. Have a great day, everyone.